What is Tuscany by bike? In 1 minute?
Volare, oh, cantare, oh, nel blu dipinto di blu, felice di stare lassù. E volavo, volavo felice più in alto del sole ed ancora più su, mentre il mondo pian piano spariva lontano laggiù. Una musica dolce suonava soltanto per me. Volare, oh, cantare, oh, nel blu dipinto di blu, felice di stare lassù.
Well, did this minute make you want to join us on this wonderful trip through Tuscany and Umbria from mid-April to May 21st? If so, sit comfortably and let's go! First, why did we choose Tuscany? This project began close to home at the Musée des Beaux-Arts de Québec during an exhibition of works by Niki de Saint-Phal that we adore. When we learned that she had created a magnificent garden in Tuscany over more than 20 years, Lucy immediately suggested that we make it our next trip. That was all it took for me to search that same evening for the location of the famous Giardino dei Tarocchi. And for cycling routes in Tuscany, using the website beachitalia.org, where I realized that there were a multitude of routes for cyclotourists. Starting with Eurovelo 5, shown here in red, which actually follows the Via Francigena, an ancient pilgrimage route to Rome. But that's not all. There's also Eurovelo 7, called the Sun Route, which passes more centrally through Italy. And for those who love the seaside, there's the Ciclovia Tirrenica, although I learned that several sections run alongside roads with heavy traffic. And there are several other local cycle paths as well, here shown in blue. Wow, too much is almost as bad as not enough. Then we did our research to identify the cities and attractions that interested us. Our trip utilized as many sections of these beautiful routes as possible, connecting them with quiet roads where needed, and here is the result. A magnificent journey totaling 1,020 kilometers by bike with 11,300 meters of elevation gain, completed in 25 days of cycling plus 30 days of visiting. And the big departure is on April 14, 2026, to land in Milan, which we choose because there are direct trains to Tuscany and we really wanted to visit the city of design. Upon arrival at the airport, it was surprisingly easy to take a bus with our luggage, including our red suitcases containing our folding bikes and the camping equipment. Once in our room facing the bus terminal and the train station, we hurried to assemble our bikes and leave our empty suitcases in the hotel's luggage storage, which we would retrieve at the end of the trip. The next day, after a good night's rest, we crossed to the central station to take a direct train to Piombino. Once again, thanks to our wonderful helix bikes, which we fold in 2 minutes into a bag so we can take any train even without dedicated bike compartments. And finally, we arrive at Campiglia Marittima station near Piombino, from where we begin our first week of cycling, starting with a tour of the island of Elba, then following the sea along quiet paths to Argentario, and finally towards the famous Giardino dei Tarocchi. After 45 years of cyclotouring together, we still get excited and thoughtful when we consider a new destination. Starting this trip on the island of Elba is full of promise. And first, a crossing always gives us that feeling of a cruise ship. And arriving in a unique place like Portoferraio is memorable, especially for having been Napoleon Bonaparte's place of exile in 1814 before his spectacular return to France. For a cyclist, however, it's the view of the peaks that impresses us, because Elba has a well-deserved reputation of being steep. But you have to admit, the effort is 1,000 times worth it. Just look at that. Without hesitation, we can say that this first day towards Piemonte was exceptional. And given the lack of camping, we treated ourselves to a very nice apartment, topped off with a delicious meal at sunset. Buonanotte! After leaving Piemonte, we savored every second of this unforgettable landscape before a smooth return to Portoferraio. And as we were already sailing away towards the mainland, we thought that we would surely come back here one day. We dock in Piombino just in time for the passeggiata to the sound of its musicians,
di città e accanto alla mia ombra nuda di malinconia.
who are actually cycling musicians.
Ciao.
We'll take 2 days to get to Argentario, starting with a beautiful park along the sea, but watch out for wild boars if you want to enjoy your picnic. And I never tire of seeing Lucy appear on all sorts of lovely paths. This is definitely a section of the Ciclovia Tirrenica that we recommend, especially since we will have some great encounters and lovely breaks watching the surfers, and discover Camping Sans Souci, where we don't even need to pitch our tent and can eat our fill on site. Upon arriving at the Argentario Peninsula, we were charmed by a lovely campsite at the Riserva della Finiglia, where we settled in for 3 nights to relax. We spent a day in this summery setting exploring Porto Ercole, one of the most beautiful villages of the Tuscan coast. Another day was spent cycling without luggage on a scenic road offering extraordinary views of the Mediterranean. Argentario was once an island, but over the centuries, sea currents deposited sand, creating 2 long strips of land connecting it to the mainland. We decided to cycle uphill to the westernmost point, stopping for a snack at midday, and then make a quick return trip, stopping for gelato in Porto Santo Stefano. A magnificent day. The next morning there is excitement in the air for the big day, the reason for this trip, the Giardino dei Tarocchi. What a marvel! Niki de Saint-Phal's work is truly breathtaking. I could easily show you for 20 minutes, but I wouldn't want to spoil the pleasure of discovering it for yourself one day. So just know that we were absolutely captivated. With our heads still full of colors, we embark on our second week in Tuscany, heading towards another magnificent region, Umbria. We begin by climbing up to Montemerano, a charming hilltop village where we love taking the time to observe the lives of the locals and this adorable little dog. We then continued on to Saturnia, a public hot spring where we learned that the number of bathers was unusually high given that it was Liberation Day. and we cycled to the magnificent fortified town of Pitigliano, where we found a charming little apartment right in the historic center, near a terrace where we peacefully ended this wonderful day. We quickly realized that to survive in Tuscany, we needed to readjust our old habits. First problem, prioritizing distance or elevation. For many years, we'd been used to covering around 60 to 70 kilometers per day, which allowed us to arrive early in the afternoon, visit places, and relax. But in Tuscany, with its surprisingly mountainous terrain, we ended the day too late and too tired. We tried a shortcut technique, like going around a mountain on a footpath. Disaster! It took us 3 hours to cover 1.8 kilometers. We also tried a shortcut through the forest instead of taking the longer route. Another disaster. Fences, streams, and rocks were all around. We finally opted for a maximum elevation gain of 600 meters per day, even if it meant only covering 40 to 45 kilometers. Touché! Second problem, sleeping on the summit in an apartment in the center of the hilltop village or in the valley in a campsite. If we opted for the camping, once we arrived, we no longer had the desire to climb and only enjoyed the village just for a few hours and came back down in the evening. So tip number 2, to be in the atmosphere of the hilltop villages with museum, terraces, grocery store and restaurant, sleeping on the summit. And with these adjustments, here's what our ideal typical day looked like. Around 7:30 we have a quick and light breakfast. 9 at the latest, we're ready to go, and thanks to our folding bikes it was easy to keep them safe in our room. We leave the village at the same time than early deliveries, starting by going downhill, downhill, and downhill again, until we reach the beautiful rolling countryside. 10:30, it's time for breakfast 2.0, a good cappuccino, usually with a cornetto. The cornetto is the Italian version of the French croissant, but be warned, these are packed with good calories. And once again, we take the opportunity to observe the quiet Italian lifestyle. Around 1100 hours, we burn off our calories, wondering when we will refuel again. Which isn't long, because at 1300 hours, it's time for a picnic in a paradise. It's usually during this break that we look on booking.com for accommodation for tonight. Around 1400 hours, we're back climbing towards these hilltop towns, which are sometimes quite steep. Thanks God. At 1500 hours, it's the dilemma of which gelato to choose. Just before checking into our apartment around 15:30, followed by a visit or walks in this charming town. But at 1700 hours, it's our favorite cultural tradition, aperitif for the passeggiata. The passeggiata is an Italian tradition deeply rooted in daily life. The word simply means stroll, and it's an opportunity to get together with your sweetheart, family, or friends, and for us to meet new people. At 19:30, it's dinner. We either buy ready-made meals at the grocery store, cook something simple and tasty, or treat ourselves to a meal at a restaurant. At first, we thought that the tradition was to go through all these stages one by one, from antipasti to dolce, but we realized we could choose, combine, and change the order as we liked. For example, a pasta primi with a contorno like a salad, or share a giant veal cutlet as a secondo and Milanese rice as a primi, or even more often, split a pizza with a nice salad. Ah, che buena la cucina italiana! Finally, around 21 o'clock, it's time to write our journal, prepare for the next day before a well-deserved long sleep, dreaming of repeating such a day, which, all in all, boils down to cycling and eating. Back on our route, we are now approaching Lago di Bolsena. A scenic descent led us there, and, as an exception to everything I've just described, we found a superb campsite just a 5-minute walk from Bolsena's old town. We discovered a captivating medieval atmosphere, complete with a passeggiata and a delicious meal while watching the sunset over the lake. Our entry into the Umbria region began with lovely quiet roads leading to Orvieto, where we had 3 favorites. The first was a funicular railway that allowed us to sleep at the foot of the city and easily ascend for sightseeing. The second was the impressive golden mosaic of its cathedral, which gave it an almost surreal beauty. Our third favorite was the Well of St. Patrick, a masterpiece of ingenuity using 2 superimposed spiral staircases that allow donkeys to descend to draw water and ascend without ever crossing paths. The next day we followed the Tiber River via the magnificent Forello Gorges before enjoying a beautiful 300 meters climb to reach Todi. While the city charms us with its narrow and steep streets, you really have to watch every corner. In Piazza del Popolo, our daily passeggiata will consist of watching the square empty of cars from parents picking up their children from school, and perhaps conducting a comparative study of Aperol Spritz versus Curaçao Spritz. The following morning, we realized that the Umbrian countryside was just as beautiful as Tuscany, but far less touristy. This meant we could enjoy enchanting medieval villages like Bevagna without a single tourist in sight, and even sleep on top of Roman ruins. Oh my God, am I dreaming? A bike path in the countryside. This miracle is our introduction to Assisi, where Saint Francois would surely be surprised to see a new generation of influencers. These beautiful cypress lines lead us to our favorite Umbrian city, Perugia. Despite the exhausting climb to the highest point in the city, we arrive at our sumptuous apartment. Since we didn't book anything in advance, and we learned that May 1st is Labor Day in Italy, we had no choice but to opt for the last available room that no one else had dared to take. But considering the exceptionally low temperature, we savored every minute of discomfort with the added bonus of a breathtaking view overlooking the Piazza del 4 Novembre, which became our favorite spot for an aperitif. Perugia truly has so much to offer, but you absolutely mustn't miss the brand new chocolate museum, which is definitely on trend. And so ended our Umbria journey with a night spent at Lago di Chiusi. Even though the campsite was completely full, the kind owners found us a lovely little spot. For our third week, we are back in Tuscany, specifically the Purple Line from Lago di Chiusi to Empoli, and there is so much to see that we have spent as many days cycling as sightseeing. When we dream of Tuscany, we expected this. But in reality, it's more like this. Not bad, isn't it? Also, we must not forget the Strade Bianche, those white gravel roads, world-renowned for the cycling race won 4 times by Tadej Pogačar. That was all it took to ignite Lucy's passion and set her off. It was with this momentum that we quickly arrived in Siena, an extraordinary city with so much to see that many cyclists choose it as a base for day trips in the surrounding area. We spent 3 nights there in an apartment with a breathtaking view, partly for taking time for necessities like the laundry and an authentic Italian barber experience, but also to visit the must-sees such as the Duomo with its overwhelming richness, the museums, and the Fortezza Medicea, which will soon host the circus. And we are totally impressed by a new and unique circus act, the entrance of the trucks. Psh. However, our Oscar goes to Piazza del Campo, where our passeggiata will show us memorable scenes like the end of the year celebration of college graduates. As we leave Siena on the Via Francigena, we're happy to meet many hikers. But since it is also the Eurovelo 5, there are many cyclotourists on a mostly gravel route that is quite comfortable. San Gimignano, also known as the Manhattan of Tuscany because of its towers, is a beautiful village, but so touristy that it influenced our planned stay in Florence, in Italian Firenze, the most touristy city in Tuscany. So we opted to spend 3 nights in Empoli, an authentically Italian city, and from there take a train for a day to Florence and a bus for a day to Vinci. From the moment we arrived at our apartment in Empoli, we were charmed. We saw a wedding and a lively flea market, just like we love. The next day, we took the train to Florence, and let's be honest, Florence is magnificent. It's an open-air museum where art history and architecture converge on every corner. But be prepared for crowds everywhere, even in May on a rainy day. Endless queues even with a ticket booked for a specific time, and little peace to admire the works you'd dream of seeing. All in all, we enjoyed the day, but we're happy to return to the tranquility of Empoli. The next day, the town of Vinci was less than 30 minutes away by bus. Leonardo da Vinci has been my idol since I was a teenager. Knowing that he spent most of his life in Tuscany and Milan, this trip felt like a pilgrimage. In total, we visited 8 places where his works or invention were exhibited, including 4 museums here in Vinci. What a thrill it was to go to the property where he was born, the very place where his immersion in nature was his inspiration for many of his inventions. What satisfaction to finally see prototypes of all his machines, of which I had only seen his drawings. Isn't that impressive? What a pleasure it is to see the stories behind all these paintings gathered together in the same museum, allowing us to better appreciate the originals, which are usually only found in major museums such as the Baptism of Christ in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, a work by the master Verrocchio, who has asked the young Leonardo to paint the angel in the lower left corner. Legend has it that this angel was so beautiful and superior to the rest of the painting that Verrocchio decided never to paint again. What a prodigy Leonardo was. Finally, It was at the Santa Maria delle Grazie convent in Milan that we truly loved the Last Supper. It took Leonardo 4 years using an experimental technique on plaster. The impressive restoration of this masterpiece is, however, the result of over 20 years of meticulous work by Mrs. Barcelon. The only downside is that a 1-hour visit costs €100 and must be booked several weeks in advance. In conclusion, this trip was well worth it just to appreciate the immense and varied talent of this genius. The next 4 days are rather short cycling days because we've set aside plenty of time to visit Pisa, Lucca, and Lago di Puccini. Leaving Empoli, we're lucky enough to follow the Arno River on a dedicated cycle path all the way to Pisa. Of course, we have to climb the tower to test our balance, but we recommend to escape the hordes of tourists on the Mura di Pisa, the wall that encircles the city and offers some truly memorable views. But our favorite spot in Tuscany is Lucca. It's a fortified city where we'd gladly live. It is encircled by a wall with a cycle path, and whose center is a mix of piazzas and quiet streets. It's the birthplace of the famous opera composer Puccini, whose work you're surely familiar with. Wow, so beautiful. Puccini also loved cycling and used to ride from Lucca to his lakeside residence. Today that path has become the Puccini cycle path, and the benches have QR codes that link to a playlist on Spotify suggested for your ride. That is so cool! It only takes 30 kilometers to reach the famous Lake Massaciucoli, which everyone actually calls Lake Puccini, and we are so captivated by its beauty that we decide to spend 2 nights there, in order to properly visit the house where he composed the majority of his operas, but also to take a tour of the picturesque lake without our luggage. And for the last few days of this trip, we'll follow the coast to Carrara and end in La Spezia. The coastal path is quite safe, but it's sandwiched between a busy road and shops that obscure the view. Let's just say that with the rain, it was a rather chilly bath, although some of the artworks did warm our hearts. Carrara is a must-see, not only because it's a charming and friendly town nestled at the foot of the mountains, but above all, it's renowned as the world capital of white marble. While you might have tried cycling there, the impressive quarries can only be explored with an organized tour in a jeep. Just take a moment to compare the tractor size to the rest of the scene. This is where Michelangelo himself came to select the pieces for his works, including his famous David. It's a shame that ultralight cyclotouring doesn't allow us to bring back heavy souvenirs. As we bid farewell to these impressive quarries, we realize the end of our journey is already approaching, and we savor this last day as we return to the Mediterranean, climbing the Monti di San Lorenzo, which offer postcard-perfect views. These images will remain etched in our memories as we take our final pedal strokes. The cherry on top, however, will be to take a day to walk the resplendent Cinque Terre. But be warned, you may not be the only ones taking the train there. Speaking of trains, our return to Milan will be more relaxed and we'll once again appreciate the ease with which our folding bikes allow us to up on any carriage. All the while, we'll smile at the sight of our neighbor practicing a new yoga technique. So long, Tuscany and Umbria. This ends another unforgettable adventure for which your questions, comments, and appreciations are welcome. If you'd like to learn more about our gear, we invite you to the English version of our website freewheels.ca in the equipment section. There you'll find the magic of ultralight cyclotouring, which shows how easier it is to travel with folding bikes and ultralight gear. You'll also find a detailed list of our equipment and how to successfully pack a bike and camping gear into a standard suitcase. And to learn more about how to plan such a trip, don't miss the tried and true tips in this video. Happy travels! Ciao!